folks. So glad you could join us today. This is the place for all music on Bloomfield Community TV, and the show is called CHOPZ, and my name is Kat Orlando. Now, talking about the biz, stories about performing on the road, around town, Detroit music history, and where it's all going, where we've been, everything like that. Covered a lot of ground in these past episodes, different genres, rock and R&B, blues and jazz. Well, let's get into the jazzy thing and the saxy thing. This gentleman right here is making some serious noise in the music world with his talents. Welcome, sax player, international recording artist. Yep. Deon Yates, everybody.
Hey, Kat, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining today.
It's my pleasure.
Deon, really appreciate it. And so maybe you could tell everybody who you are and what you do in your own words.
That's like a loaded question. I do a lot. So my name is Deon Yates, and I'm a saxophone player. You know, that's my passion. That's my main thing that I love to be known as. Other than that, I'm a media and communications professional and all that thing. But, you know, my passion and what I really love the most is playing the sax, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. And when we first met, I mean, you were my sound guy for a minute there, and I think, oh, this guy runs great sound. But then a couple years later, like, wait a minute, I found out you play this. Not only do you play the sax, so like wail on it, and I'm like, you were really quiet about it back then. I don't even remember you mentioning it back then. But yeah, you were just definitely. I see you online and all the touring and playing you're doing, and. So you've shared the stage with people like Nick, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name, Coleon.
Yes, Nick Coleon.
Okay, Paul Brown, Lynn Roundtree, Marion Meadows, and people like that. And is that usually like festivals and things like that you play?
Sometimes it's festivals, sometimes it's concert tours. So with Paul Brown, I was actually signed to the same label that Paul Brown was on. And so through the label, we worked together, and he produced music for one of my albums for the record that was on. The actual label is called Woodward Avenue Records, believe it or not. And it's based out of Florida, but the owner of it was from the metropolitan Detroit area. And so when he created his record label, he decided to take some Detroit home with him and called it Woodward Avenue. But yeah, so me and Paul Brown, we went on tour with Richard Elliott as an opening act for him for a few shows, because Paul has produced for a lot of the major artists. Paul has several #1 hits. He's produced for Boney James. He's produced for Richard Elliott, Rick Braun, Dave Koz, Peter White. I mean, just the myriad of smooth jazz royalty Paul Brown has produced for, and he's a guitar player, and he has his own music as well. So I was fortunate to be able to hit the road for a couple of shows with that guy and have him work on my record.
Nice. And you just recently did a show in Pensacola.
Yes.
Is that the same sort of?
So actually, Pensacola was my show. It was a solo show, which was kind of amazing because I had the show booked for a few months, and the hurricane came through, and so I was wondering if the show was going to be canceled. And so I contacted the venue owner, and she was like, it didn't even rain in Pensacola. I was like, wow. So all the hurricane damage that they had in Florida, but it didn't really touch Pensacola. So she said the show was still on. So
that was the Helene.
Yeah, it was two hurricanes, the Helene, and then it was another.
Yeah.
And so it didn't bother Pensacola at all. So thankfully I was able to get in there, and it did rain the whole time I was there. So I was kind of mad about being in Florida while it's cold here, and it was raining the whole time.
So let's go back to when you first started in music. I always like to.
You want to go back that far?
Yeah, well, I always like to ask artists, where did you start? What was the initial thing, maybe when you were a kid, that drew you into music and listening to it?
So there's a couple of things. So early on in my childhood, I had no idea or desire whatsoever to be a musician. I wanted to be a baseball player. I was on all the little league teams, did all that stuff, and music wasn't even on my radar. I was, I think, in the third grade. So I was about 8 years old. And at my elementary school, Guyton Elementary on the east side of Detroit, we didn't have an instrumental music program when I was in first and second grade.
Sure,
So
right.
when I got to the third grade, we got a music teacher. So they started a brand new music program. And so at that time, I had been in the choir, and because you had to have like these little activities in elementary school. So I was in the choir. I was in the drama class, acting. And so when they started the band class, I was like, maybe I'll try to learn how to play an instrument,
Oh, okay.
And so the teacher's like, hey, who all wants to join the band? You can sign up, and you can learn how to play an instrument. So I'm like, cool, I want to play the drums.
Okay, now you're the third person.
All little boys want to play drums.
Okay.
I think it's something about beating on stuff because that's
right.
in our DNA.
Sure.
But of course, all the little boys wanted to play drums.
Okay.
So we had too many little boys wanting to play drums.
Right.
So the teacher was like, well, we need some people to volunteer to switch and try to learn a new instrument. So I was like, okay, I'll play something else.
Okay.
And so he put me on flute.
Oh.
So flute was actually my first woodwind. And, when you start off on flute, they just give you the head joint.
That's right.
That's all they give you.
Yeah.
Because you got to learn how to blow through that hole and make that sound.
Right.
So it's like blowing through a pop bottle. So you just practice for weeks, just making a good sound through the head joint before you get the rest of the instrument.
That's how I started. Yep.
So, but I was the only boy playing flute.
Oh, okay.
And so you got to imagine, we're talking about in the mid to late 70s, and I was a boy playing the flute.
Uh-oh, was that bad news?
Well, because flute has always seemed like a girly instrument.
Right, that's what I mean.
And so all the little boys tease, I want to play drums, something manly, right? But everybody would tease you because you're a boy and you're sitting there with all the girls playing flute and clarinet. Those were like girly instruments. And so I was feeling kind of bad about being the only boy playing the flute. I later realized or learned that most of the most famous flute players in the world were men, classical and jazz.
Yeah, well.
But that didn't make me stick to playing the flute.
Okay.
So what actually happened, back then the schools used to recruit. So your junior high school band and teacher would come to the elementary school and give a performance and recruit students. High school would go to the middle schools because music was really important back then in the school system.
Sure.
So we had an assembly I don't know if y'all know ours wasn't really a cafetorium, but in the old schools used to have the /cafeteria /auditorium was like one space. You had a stage. And
right.
So anyway, we had an assembly, and the junior high school band from Remus Robinson Middle School on the east side came over, and they had a concert band. They had a small orchestra, and then they had a jazz band. And so when the jazz band took the stage, there was this little boy playing a flute, playing jazz.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, whoa. I'm like, he had his head cocked to the side, leaning like this, and was jamming, playing. I was like, so seeing this little boy playing the flute, they look like me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I might be able to do this. And now he's playing jazz, so he's like jamming, and they're like playing some good music. I was like, I think I'm going to do that. The little boy's name was Cassius Richmond.
Okay.
So I don't know if you heard that name before, but Cassius Richmond is one of the secret, untold legends of the Detroit area. This guy was, and still is. He's still around. Musical genius. When I say musical genius, I'm talking about musical genius. When we were in high school, he used to put on like the super sax records with the super sax arrangements, the group super sax.
Oh, okay.
With all like the Charlie Parker, they do arrangements of that stuff. He could listen to the record and write out the sheet music. He didn't have to go to a piano or play the note and then write it. He could hear it and write it verbatim, basically transcribe it just from the record. And this was as a teenager and before he was doing this. But I met him when I think he's about 2 years older than I am.
So, needless to say, right? Perfect pitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect pitch.
Yeah.
The kid was like so profound. So again, when I got to junior high school, I was in the 6th grade. He was in the 8th because he's 2 years ahead of me.
All right.
And so we used to practice because I lived one block from my junior high school.
Okay.
my family, because it was a community based. So I had a cousin that was the home economics teacher. My sister was the head secretary in the main
wow.
office.
Yeah.
So, and our teachers lived in the neighborhoods
Yeah.
back then. So we all knew each other. So I was able to go there and we would rehearse and practice. So one time we were having practice. Cassius was at my house. And we had the jazz band there, and we were practicing. And we was like, Cassius, you're like so good. How can we be able to play like you? We want to be able to play like you.
Oh, okay.
So this kid, now mind you, he's in the 8th grade. So what is that, about 13
Yeah.
years old? He's in the 8th grade. So we asked him, how could we learn how to play like him? And so he's like, y'all really want to learn how to play like me? He took us in the backyard behind my house in the alley, dug around some weeds and stuff and pulled up a root out the ground. And he said that this right here is called the gobble root. So I remember it like it was yesterday. So he said, this is the gobble root. He said, if you want to learn how to play like me, he said, practice 4 hours a day and chew on this root.
What?
And you'll be able to play just like me.
Okay,
And
I
that's-
hear the 4 hours.
But
a day,
listen,
but I don't get
but
it.
see, we're kids. At Kid Logic, we didn't even pay attention to the practice 4 hours. We thinking it's the root. But see, he got us. This guy's 13.
Yeah.
His wisdom, his genius. He said, practice 4 hours a day and chew on this root. So we going out digging up this root. We in school. They getting the teachers fussing at us. Why you chewing on this root? Why you got us? Because we like we need to do this. So we're chewing on this root. But me, Rodney Whitaker. Rodney Whitaker is currently the tenured professor of jazz studies at Michigan State.
Okay.
So we were kids. So
Yeah.
we were all chewing this root and practicing 4 hours a day.
Oh, so you did do the
And
practice.
we got better.
Okay.
But we didn't attribute it to the practicing 4 hours a day. We attributed it to chewing that root, because Cassius said if we chew this root, we go. But see, he got us to practice.
Wow.
And that started, and we practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and got better and better.
Nobody
and
got
better
sick
and
on the
better.
root then.
Nobody got sick because, again, this young man's genius.
Yeah.
We found out what he actually gave us was a wild carrot. So in the cities, you might see this long stem with these white little flowers on it.
Oh,
It's actually a wild carrot, so you can actually eat that and not get sick.
Now see,
And, and this kid knew this.
Right. That's crazy. That's crazy.
But yeah, Cassius, the reason why that I stuck with it and got so involved in jazz was basically because of Cassius.
So then, going from flute, which is kind of the same progression I did, flute to saxophone, was that a challenge going from that type of armature to saxophone? Totally different mouthpiece, right?
Actually, I think it seemed easier because, believe it or not, physics-wise, it takes a lot of wind to blow a flute.
Yeah.
People think because it's a little small thing that it doesn't.
Yeah.
But the technical side of it is that the majority of your air is not going into the instrument.
True. It's going right across.
So it takes a lot of wind to do it
Yeah.
proficiently. And I did it pretty well. I was in all the concert bands and orchestras in school. The MSBOA competitions was at Michigan School Band and Orchestra Association. So I won first place medals for classical. So me and Rodney, we were members of the Detroit Symphony Civic Orchestra in high school.
Yeah.
So I grew up playing classical. So I played flute for quite some time. How I got to the saxophone in the 7th grade.
Okay.
So Cassius had graduated and went to high school. So in the 7th grade, we got a new band teacher in our junior high, and he wanted to create a jazz quintet. So he came to me, put a tenor saxophone in my hand.
Oh.
Rodney was playing violin before this. So Rodney is a double bass professor and all this, but he was playing violin, I was playing flute. So when Mr. Taylor, that was our new teacher, Hosea Taylor, he wanted to create a jazz quintet, he put a tenor sax in my hand and put an upright bass in Rodney's hand, and we started our jazz quintet. And then basically, as they say, the rest is history.
So you just
from
made
there.
that transition from flute to sax, no issues at all. It sounds like it's smooth.
And my teacher, Mr. Taylor, wanted me to be a music teacher. He liked me for some reason. So he made me learn an instrument in every family.
Oh, okay.
So during my junior high school days, I played flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, French horn, trumpet, trombone.
Yeah.
Something in every family, because he really wanted me to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I don't play any of those instruments well, but I still think I know enough to teach somebody the basics if I had to
Yeah,
go
you're
into
still
education.
well versed in that, and so then you were formally trained, you know. So did you ever like go off and like try to just jam off of something, or what? You probably have a good ear as well.
Yeah.
I mean, sight read and ear. I'm guessing.
So fortunately,
you'll do what you do.
yeah. I mean, fortunately, I grew up in Detroit in a time where music was like a really important thing, even in the schools and outside of school. And I grew up in the era where we had access to like some great musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, the Motown era. So people always talk about the legendary rhythm section from Motown, the Funk Brothers.
Yes.
So the Funk Brothers was founded by pianist Earl Van Dyke.
Yes. Right.
So Earl Van Dyke was an artist in residence accompanying us at Osborne High School
Oh wow.
when I was in high school. So all of our bands, we used to all fellowship and hang out together. So musician friends that I had from junior high, after we went on and went to high school, they went places. Ernie Rogers, another saxophone legend, Detroit Motown session musician, taught at Northwestern.
Oh okay.
Southeastern was my neighborhood high school, but Martin Luther King had a better jazz band program, and so I was able to petition Region 8 back then. We had regions, so I was able to petition the region to change schools because you just couldn't go to any other school outside your region.
Oh, okay.
You know, you had to petition. So because of the band program, I was able to get into Martin Luther King, and we had Herbie Williams was our artist in resident there, who was also another Motown trumpeter, was in studio sessions with Marcus Belgrave, who was at Osborne. So we had all of these musicians that were working musicians in the industry that were our teachers and mentors. So at early ages, we got a chance to play and hang out with these guys and actually start doing gigs. You know, by the time we were 14 years old, we're doing paid gigs with Marcus Belgrave.
Jeez,
Earl Van Dyke, you know? So that was like amazing.
Well, what a great music program to have that, like you say, have that incorporated into the program like that.
And so ear training, so the teacher that we had when I was in the 6th grade in junior high school, who brought the band to my elementary school, his name is Donald Washington.
Okay.
So Donald Washington created a group called Bird Train Now, which I was one of the original members of that group, and it started in Detroit. And so he actually started it while he taught in Detroit public schools at Remus Robinson.
Okay.
But he ended up leaving Detroit and moving to Minnesota. But before he did, like, he left the school system here. And for several years after that, he still kept the group together.
Okay.
So that's where I got like the avant-garde stuff. I got like the bebop, the more ear training, you know, playing stuff by ear and more improvisational things.
Yes.
You know, so Mr. Taylor taught us more of the structure and the classical forms of jazz, traditional, the music and things. And then Mr. Washington taught us the cultural and the even the spiritual and those sides of it. And so one of Mr. Washington's most notable students, saxophonist James Carter.
Oh, I know James.
So
too.
James Carter has been like a phenomenon, and we were in this group together. I was actually in Bird Train Now before James got in the group. So a lot of people, Dwight Adams came through Bird Train Now. We've dealt with Bob Hurst came through in and around. So this group Bird Train Now had a lot of people that are like our OGs or like Detroit legendary jazz folks. We got to hang out because of being in Bird Train Now. That opened up other doors to us that even with the school stuff. So hanging out with Ralph Armstrong and those. So these were all the guys that we were just like, we're like their nephews and their little brothers.
I think I went to the wrong high school.
So it was a lot going on. And Mr. Washington, he used to take us on trips. So we were all, Bird Train Now consisted of students from elementary through high school.
Okay.
So his son, Kevin, at the time, let's see, Kevin played drums. He played a bunch of different instruments, but he mostly played drums. And Rodney and I think we were maybe 16 or 17 years old.
Okay.
And Eastern Michigan University at WEMU used to have an annual jazz competition.
Oh, okay.
So when I think we were about 16, I think it was our 11th grade year. So we won the WEMU jazz competition. So we had a quartet.
Okay.
And Rodney was 17, I was 17 or 16, because me and Rodney the same age. The trumpet player, we had a trumpet player, his name was Sean Harden, and our drummer was down in Washington's son, Kevin Washington. He was 10 years old. So we won a college jazz competition with a 10-year-old drummer.
Wow.
So that's how, I mean, we were immersed, and he would take us on trips. We've played in Chicago. He took this whole group, took us to Chicago to perform at festivals, took us to Mobile, Alabama to perform at festivals and events down there. We performed at the DIA. So this same group, I performed with Roy Brooks, you know,
And
at the
this is
DIA.
early on, you know.
Now we're talking about, you know, early 80s.
Okay.
That we were doing concerts at the DIA.
So now later on, then you tour here and there, and so now, you know, at this stage of the game, you know, are there any shows that in particular that stand out to you over the last several years or so that come to mind?
There are a few. There are a few. You mentioned Nick Coleon.
Yes.
So, you know, sadly, Nick Coleon passed away.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so just performing with him. So I'm playing the contemporary jazz now. So I grew up straight ahead bebop, but more of the smooth, what they call smooth jazz or contemporary jazz. Nick was literally my godfather in contemporary jazz. So he was one of those kind of artists that love to share information and knowledge with you. Now, Nick was from Chicago, but once I met Nick, he took me under his wing. So he taught me about the business of the smooth jazz industry.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot that has to go with, it's one thing to be able to play.
Yes.
But if you want to get out there and sell records and promote yourself as an artist, you have to learn the other stuff as well. So Nick was one of those guys that kind of took me under his wing and showed me the ropes. And anywhere that he was performing, and I was in attendance. Either I was on the show as like an opener, or if I was just in the audience, he would always ask me if I had my axe with me. He's like, "You got your axe?"
Okay.
He's like, "I'm gonna get you up here, get you some FaceTime." So if it could be a big major festival with nothing but like with Boney James and David Sanborn, but with big names like that, and he'll pull me up on the stage to perform. Wow. He said, "You got to get some FaceTime out here so people can get used to seeing and hearing."
Well, that's a mentor right there.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
And so he always did it. So every time,
very cool.
I mean, one of the funny ones, we were in Arizona. I've never been to Arizona, you know, for a show ever. I don't even think I've been to Arizona in my life. Maybe when I was a kid, my dad, we drove through there.
Okay.
But me and my wife, we were at the Arizona Jazz Festival. And I'm wondering, like, why it's like 110 degrees and everybody got these long sleeves on and pants. I'm like, I'm hot. And I come to find out the reason why they had all these long sleeves and long leg pants on, me and my wife got sunburned so bad.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because the elevation and you're right there. And I've never been sunburned before like that in my life. But but at that concert, you know, Nick called me up on stage.
Nice. Yeah.
And from that recognition, they had like an after party jam session set. So I always take my horn with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
So after party jam session, you know, I knew a lot of the artists there. And of course, I got to play the whole night because it was like, come on, Deon, get up here, man, do your thing. Yeah. Met Tashina Arnold. She played Pam on the Martin Lawrence show, the one he called BDB.
Oh, okay.
And she sings. She's a singer.
Yeah.
And so got to jam and perform with her. So she was singing. So just the music put me in those spaces.
Oh, okay.
And so those are always memorable. I mean, another one is meeting comedian Sinbad.
Oh, I think I saw a picture. Yeah. Okay.
So Sinbad is from Michigan. He's from Benton Harbor.
Oh.
Yep. So he's a Michigander.
I forgot about that.
I met Sinbad. I was playing in the house band on the Capitol Jazz Super Cruise.
Okay.
So there's a festival organization in Columbia, Maryland, that they do the Capitol Jazz Fest every year.
Oh, okay.
And then they started having a cruise. So they have the Capitol Jazz Festival, then they have the Capitol Jazz Super Cruise, where they got major artists from all over, on this
Wow.
big cruise.
Yep.
So I was playing with bassist Gerald Veasley, was the director of
okay.
the house band. And so I was a regular member of the house band, especially during the late night jams. And so that's how I met Sinbad. Sinbad was on the cruise doing the show because they had comedy shows and things of that nature.
Sure.
And Sinbad, every once in a while, he would do what he calls his funk and comedy show. So he would have a full band, on his comedy show. So by playing behind him on the cruise, we connected, exchanged information. And I'm like, just when you walk on one of these cruises, these are people that are major smooth jazz stars and
Yes.
icons, but they're not like R&B or pop stars. They're like normal people.
More
A lot of
accessible
them.
and,
Yeah, we
easy
go to the
approachable.
buffet on the boat. We at the
Yeah.
cruise ship go to the buffet and having
Nice.
lunch, and so we sitting and just talking.
That's cool.
The first night I met Sinbad, we stayed up till like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and he was just cracking jokes the whole time.
That's
And so we got close and got connected. And so he was coming to Detroit. He had a couple of shows lined up, Detroit, Indianapolis, Steel City. And so he was like, Deon, he's like, hey, I'm coming to Detroit. I got a few shows in the area. Can you put me together a band?
Wow.
And
Oh,
so I put together the band and did a few shows with him and basically became his musical director for the Midwest. And so when he would come to town or the
another
area,
thing I didn't know about you.
when he would come to town. Well, I don't see you're having a conversation with me. I usually don't just tell everything to
Oh, okay,
everybody.
sure, sure.
And I mean, because you know how sometimes you've met a lot of Detroit musicians. We have some people that they wear all their accomplishments or whatever on their shoulder. It's like just want everybody to know.
Well,
this
you're
is
like
what they
me.
do.
I'm not like, okay,
It's
I'll
like-
put it in a show right here. But
Right.
in a little setting, I'm like, hey, I did this and I do this.
Exactly. So
I know
that's
where
never
you're at.
been my personality.
Sure,
sure. Those who know.
Yeah.
So if you know, you know, and if not, then But if somebody asks me to have a conversation,
Yes.
I'll let them know, some of the things that I've done.
On another note, too, I wanted to ask you about, which I think is an interesting subject, as a sax player, your endorsements that you have. You are an endorser of Dakota saxes.
Yes.
And you have the whole set, right? The soprano, the
Ah.
alto, and
Yeah,
Nine
I have 9 Dakota saxes.
do you really? Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And only because that I've gotten a little I wouldn't say fashion conscious, but there's reasons why I have different ones.
Sure.
So because I play, all genres of music, so the material that the horn is made of and the finish and everything
Okay.
attributes what kind of tone it gets.
Yep.
So like a silver sax will be more brighter than just the all brass or bronze. So I have different ones. So if I'm playing like pop and rock music, I want that real bright sound that cuts through.
Oh, all right.
And so if I'm playing more straight ahead traditional stuff, I have the bronze, unlacquered, just like an old Selmer Mark VI. So that gives me my John Coltrane,
All right.
if I want to do that. And so then I have one that's black onyx, which is kind of like it's nickel material.
love that.
And so that's kind of in between my bright and my dark. So I do have a reason for having, I had to explain to my wife why I got so many, why I have different horns, because it all depends on what music I'm playing and what sound I want to give.
So they contact you and say, hey, we want our instruments to be seen by, somebody of your stature, for instance. So it's good PR for them, or how does that work?
So
How's that
for
work?
me, what happened with Sax Dakota,
Okay.
and Sax Dakota was my gateway endorsement.
Oh,
So once you get endorsed with a company, then it's easier to get with other companies.
Okay.
So Sax Dakota was created by a gentleman named Pete LaPlaca. So Peter LaPlaca. So the name may or may not sound familiar to you, but I'm sure you remember the LA Sax.
Yes.
So the LA Sax, the first company made those color horns. You know, Bill Clinton had the Stars and Stripes. That was the LA Sax.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so that was Pete's company. Pete founded LA Sax. He was the first company to make those flashy, colorful, marketable horns.
Yeah.
And so Pete actually sold LA Sax and retired.
Okay.
But just like us musicians find it hard to retire, he couldn't stay retired. So he came back out and created a new horn line called Sax Dakota.
Oh, all right.
And so saxophonist Richard Elliott was Pete's first major endorser for LA Sax. And so I had grown to become good friends with Richard Elliott. So in 2011, so just before I got married to my wife Tamara, Richard introduced me to Pete and basically vouched for me to him to become an endorsed Dakota Sax artist.
That's so cool.
So Richard Elliott made it possible for me to get my first instrument endorsement.
Oh, that's such a cool thing. You know, I could be talking to about saxophones for hours here. But do you have any, well, first of all, you have a website, right?
Yes.
And maybe you can tell everybody how to find info on you and your music.
So the easiest way is to go to DeonYates.com. That's my name, DeonYates.com.
Okay.
So I've been working on it. Now, that's something else I do also. I design websites for our clients because I have my own media and communications company. And so my website is always the last one to get worked on. So I work on everybody else's and make theirs look fabulous and then leave mine the last. But I think it looks pretty nice now.
Yes,
you can go to it. But yeah, go to my website. I try to keep my calendar updated. You know, it's the end of the year, so I don't have a lot of things on. Most of my shows are over for the year. But I'm doing a new project in 2025 that you're going to start seeing some things come out about that. It's called the Brass and Sax Experience. So what the Brass and Sax Experience is, it's a duo show package with me and a trumpet player, trumpeter Rob Zinn, who was originally, I think, from the Baltimore area. He lives in Florida now. But we were heavily influenced by Richard Elliott and Rick Braun. And so in this Brass and Sax Experience, we do our original music, and he has like a lot of songs that has sax in it, and I have a lot of songs that have trumpet in it, especially on my albums. Lynn Roundtree plays on all the trumpet parts. But we do a tribute to Rick Braun and Richard Elliott as well. So we play some of their classic tunes that they're known for in that show package. And I was on the road with Rick Braun and did a few shows with him and actually talked to him about the idea of us doing their music. And so he was actually excited that we were doing a tribute to him and Richard. And in his word, he was like, I'm so glad you guys decided to do this basically while we're still alive so we can get our flowers, we can enjoy it and appreciate it. You know, instead of after we're gone and left the planet, we wouldn't even know about it.
Absolutely.
And so I actually got a video clip of him saying that, endorsing our tribute to
that's
those
on your
guys.
website too?
Yes.
And your music is on all the music outlets?
All the streaming platforms and everywhere. Yeah.
So look for Deon Yates on his website and all those music outlets for his music and shows and all of the above. And thank you, Deon, for being on the show today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Hope to see you again real soon.
Please come back. All right, everybody, we're going to say bye and see you later on CHOPZ.